was the last slave ship to the United States, even though her trip had ended 18 months earlier than the Clotilda's. If the date of their awful journey has been contested or even refuted, more importantly, these Africans' singular experience has not generated much attention, although they realized more in America than many other groups of immigrants. In the heart of the Deep South, in Plateau and Magazine Point, 3 miles north of Mobile, they created a small town, the first continuously controlled by blacks, the only one run by Africans. And unlike most post-Reconstruction black settlements, theirs has endured and is home to hundreds of their descendants who, in turn, form the only African-American community whose members can all identify their African ancestors. Their story started in West Africa, in the Bight of Benin, a region known ominously as the Slave Coast. From small towns in the countries that are today Benin and Nigeria, young adults, teenagers, and children were brought to the coast and locked up in a slave pen, a barracoon, in Ouidah. They had names like Kasola, Abache, Abile, Omolabi, Kupoli, Kahunko, and Arzuma. They were farmers, fishermen, and traders. They followed Islam, Vodun, or the Orisha. Some had been married, others were too young to have gone through initiation. The largest group was made up of prisoners of war captured by the Dahomean army during a dawn attack on their town. The rest of their companions were victims of kidnappings or slave raids. They spoke various languages, had lived in different parts of the region, and had different cultures and experiences. But in the barracoon and on the Clotilda, they created a strong, tight-knit community. The man at the origin of their dreadful journey, Timothy Meaher, owned a plantation and, with his brothers James and Burns, a shipyard and several steamers. As some people in the South were agitating for the reopening of the international slave trade, he had bet a large sum that he could bring a ship full of niggers to Mobile and not be caught. His accomplice in the scheme, William Foster, was the builder of the Clotilda. With his schooner disguised as an innocuous cargo ship, Foster sailed to Ouidah in March 1860. There, in a barracoon near the beach, he selected 19-year-old Kasola, who became Cudjo Lewis, Kahunko, a young girl who had been kidnapped, Arzuma, a Muslim woman from the north, and dozens of their companions. Brought to America and enslaved for almost 5 years on plantations and steamboats, the young Africans formed a bloc distinct from everyone else and ready to stand up forcibly to anybody, white or black, they perceived as a threat. Once free again, they regrouped and put their energy into finding a way to go back to their families in Africa. When their plan failed, they decided to do the next best thing: recreate Africa where they were. They shared all they had, saved money, built each other's houses, and solved problems collectively. Despite the hardships, their sense of unity and kinship made their African town a success. Conversing in a common West African language, they ruled their settlement according to their laws. Goompa, a nobleman from Dahomey who had fallen from grace, was their chief, and they appointed 2 young men to be their judges. Within this African enclave, they raised their children, teaching them the languages and values they had learned from their families and brought from the homelands they cherished. Long after their deportation, they still hoped the interviews they gave to curious strangers would somehow get word to their relatives that they were still alive. Their arrival on the Clotilda had been widely reported in the newspapers, and over the course of 65 years, the Africans of Mobile talked to journalists and writers, from obscure people to a Pulitzer Prize winner, and the future novelist Zora Neale Hurston. Harper's Weekly published an interview of Cudjo and his wife Abile in 1887. Henry Romaine, an officer with the 14th U.S. Colored Infantry Regiment, wrote about them, as did Mary McNeil Scott, the famous Mobile poetess and wife of renowned Japanese art expert Ernest Francisco Fenollosa. Samuel Hawkins Marshall Byers, the poet, diplomat, and author who composed the song Sherman's March to the Sea, visited them in 1903 and published a long article in Harper's Monthly. Alabama-born former slave, activist, and educator Booker T. Washington also paid a visit in 1909, and Emma Langdon Roche, a Mobile illustrator, published a book about their story in 1914. In the summer of 1928, Zora Neale Hurston spent 2 months gathering detailed information from Cudjo Lewis for a book. He told her about his youth and capture, the Middle Passage, enslavement, and life in Africantown.